A young man had been searching for wisdom all his life. He was hungry for success, desperate for peace, and constantly restless inside. He read books, attended seminars, and followed motivational speakers. He worked hard, but no matter how much he achieved, something always felt missing. His mind was like a crowded marketplace, noisy, restless, never silent. So one day, he made a decision: I will go to the mountains. I will find a true master who can give me the answers I need. After days of travel, he finally arrived at a quiet monastery, hidden high above the clouds. There, he met an old monk who was known for his deep wisdom. The monk's face was calm, his eyes sharp yet kind, as if he could see right into your soul. The young man bowed and said, "Master, I've come a long way. I've studied many things, but I still feel lost. Please, teach me the secret to success, the secret to peace." The monk didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked the young man a strange question. "Do you know who your greatest enemy is?" The young man frowned. His mind raced. He thought of all the obstacles he had faced: failure, rejection, doubt, poverty. "Is it fear?" he guessed. "Or maybe failure?" The monk shook his head gently. "No, your greatest enemy is your own crowded mind." The young man was confused. How could his mind be his enemy? After all, his mind was the tool he used to think, to plan, to dream. But the monk didn't explain. Instead, he motioned for the young man to sit down. A servant brought a pot of steaming tea and 2 cups. The monk poured tea into the young man's cup. Slowly, carefully, the golden liquid rose to the rim. But the monk didn't stop. He kept pouring. The tea spilled over, dripping onto the table, splashing onto the floor. The young man leapt up. "Stop. The cup is full. It can't take any more." The monk set down the teapot and smiled. "Exactly. And so is your mind." The young man stared at him, unsure what to say. The monk continued, "Your mind is full of opinions, full of fears, full of everything you think you already know. You chase more and more books, more advice, more information. But just like this cup, nothing new can enter because it is already overflowing. Until you learn to empty your mind, wisdom cannot flow in. Until you let go, clarity cannot be found." The words struck the young man deeply. For years, he thought the answer to life was adding more effort, more knowledge, more strategies. But now, for the first time, he considered the opposite, that perhaps the real secret was not in adding, but in removing. The monk's smile was calm, but his words were sharp as lightning. "You are not lost because you don't know enough. You are lost because you cannot make space for the truth. A crowded mind is your enemy. Empty it, and you will finally see." The young man sat in silence, stunned. His journey had just begun, and already the lesson was nothing like he expected. What did it really mean to empty the mind? And how could that possibly change his life? The next morning, the young man woke before sunrise. He expected the monk to teach him meditation, or maybe some sacred words of wisdom. But instead, the monk handed him a large, heavy bag. "Carry this," the monk said, pointing toward a steep path that disappeared into the forest. The young man was confused. This wasn't what he had traveled so far for. But he respected the monk, so he slung the bag over his shoulder and began climbing. At first, it wasn't so bad. He walked confidently, thinking, "This is easy. I can handle it." He even felt a little proud of his strength. But as the path grew steeper, the weight pressed harder into his shoulders. His back began to ache, his breath grew short, and sweat dripped down his forehead. After some time, the young man's legs shook with exhaustion. Finally, he dropped the bag onto the ground and shouted, "This is impossible. Why did you give me such a heavy load? I can't carry it anymore." The monk, who had been walking calmly beside him, said nothing at first. He simply bent down, opened the bag, and revealed what was inside. The young man stared in disbelief. The bag wasn't filled with food, clothes, or anything useful. It was filled with rocks. Just heavy, useless stones. Frustration boiled in the young man's chest. "Why would you make me carry this? These rocks are worthless." The monk's calm eyes met his. His voice was gentle, but his words cut deep. "This bag is your life. And these rocks are everything you hold onto but don't need. Every regret, every fear, every failure, every harsh word someone once said to you. These are the burdens you carry day after day, even though they serve no purpose. No wonder you are so tired. The young man froze. His anger melted into silence. The monk continued, you want to climb the mountain of peace. You want to climb the mountain of success. But how can you rise when you refuse to let go of the rocks? How can you move forward when you cling to pain from the past? The young man looked at the bag again. He thought of his own life. He remembered the mistakes that haunted him at night, the failures that made him doubt himself, the opinions of others that echoed in his head like a curse. He realized he had been carrying those rocks everywhere, not in his hands but in his heart. Tears welled up in his eyes. He whispered, so this is why I feel so heavy inside. Not because of what's happening outside me, but because of what I refuse to put down. The monk nodded. Exactly. The world itself is not too heavy. It is the bag you choose to carry that makes it unbearable. Learn to empty it. Learn to let go. Only then will you have the strength to climb higher. The young man fell silent. Slowly, he bent down, picked up one rock, and looked at it carefully. He imagined it was a regret from his past, something he had failed at, something he had punished himself for. Then, he tossed the rock aside. It landed on the ground with a dull thud. And strangely, the young man felt lighter, even though it was just one stone. For the first time, he understood what the monk was trying to show him. Life becomes lighter when we let go of what we no longer need. That day, the climb was not about reaching the top of the forest path. It was about discovering the secret weight that had been holding him back for years. The young man stayed in the monastery. Life there was simple, almost too simple for someone used to the noise of the city. There were no phones, no rushing crowds, no endless chatter. Just the sound of the wind moving through the trees, the distant ringing of a bell, and the quiet steps of monks who lived each day with calm purpose. At first, the young man struggled. His mind was restless, like a wild horse that refused to be tamed. Even in silence, he could hear voices in his head. You should be working. You should be earning more. You should be planning your future. His thoughts raced faster than ever before. He went to the monk one morning and said, Master, I can't do this. I sit here in silence, but my mind grows louder. I try to rest, but the weight of my worries won't leave me. The monk listened patiently, then handed him a small piece of paper. Every morning, he said, write down one thing you fear, one thing you regret, or one thing you cannot control. Then, burn it. The young man frowned. That's it. That simple. The monk smiled. Simple, but not easy. So the young man tried. The first day, he wrote, I fear failing in life. He watched the flame swallow the paper. Something inside him loosened. Not much, but enough to notice. The next day, he wrote, I regret disappointing my family. Again, he burned it. The smoke curled into the air, and he realized something powerful. He couldn't change the past, but he could choose not to carry it. Day after day, he repeated the practice. Each time he burned a paper, he burned a burden. Slowly, the weight on his shoulders began to lift, not because the world changed, but because he was changing inside. And then came the hardest day. The young man sat with his paper, but his hands trembled. He wrote, I cannot control what others think of me. This was his deepest wound. For years, he had lived for other people's approval, carrying their words like sharp stones in his heart. He had been crushed by criticism, terrified of judgment, and addicted to praise. He stared at the paper for a long time, then finally set it on fire. The flames flickered, and as the paper turned to ash, so did the chains he had carried for years. That evening, he sat by a stream with the monk. The water shimmered under the moonlight, flowing freely, never stopping, never clinging. The monk pointed at the stream and said, Do you see how the water moves? It doesn't hold on to the rocks. It doesn't cling to the branches. It flows. That is the way of a free mind. The young man asked softly, But how can I live like this when I return to the world? The world is full of noise, full of pressure. The monk closed his eyes and replied, The world teaches you to fill your mind, with plans, with doubts, with desires. But a truly powerful life begins when you empty your mind. When there is space inside you, wisdom flows naturally. In space, you find freedom. And in freedom, you discover who you really are. The young man felt tears rising, not from sadness, but from release. For the first time in his life, he understood that wisdom was not about adding more. It was about letting go of what blocked the light. And as he sat by the stream, listening to the gentle flow of water, he felt something he had been chasing all his life. Peace. Months passed. The young man's days in the monastery felt like a lifetime, yet also like the blink of an eye. He had arrived restless and burdened, but now, when he looked into the mirror of the monastery's stream, he saw someone different. His eyes were calmer, his shoulders lighter, and his heart no longer racing with anxiety. One morning, the monk called him. "It is time," he said softly. The young man knew what he meant. His journey at the monastery was complete. The real test would not be within these quiet walls, it would be back in the world he had come from. With gratitude, he bowed deeply. "Master, thank you. You've given me wisdom I never imagined." The monk smiled. "I have given you nothing. You simply cleared space to see what was always within you. Remember, the cup must stay empty. The moment you let it overflow again, you will return to your old self. Keep space in your mind, and you will carry peace wherever you go." With those words, the young man left the mountain. When he returned to the city, the noise felt louder than ever before. Cars honked, people rushed, advertisements screamed for attention. Yet strangely, he didn't feel overwhelmed. Where once the noise would have entered his mind like arrows, now it bounced off like harmless rain. His friends noticed immediately. "You've changed," one of them said. "You look different, stronger, calmer. What happened to you up there in the mountains?" The young man smiled gently. "I stopped filling my mind with noise. I emptied it, and in that emptiness, I found peace." His friends laughed, thinking it was just a clever line. But they couldn't deny what they saw. When challenges arose, the young man didn't panic. When someone insulted him, he didn't break. When opportunities appeared, he seized them with clarity and confidence. What changed wasn't the world, it was his mind. One day, he walked past a park where children were playing. A boy tripped and fell, scraping his knee. The boy burst into tears. His father rushed over, panicking, scolding the boy for being careless. The young man knelt down, smiled at the child, and said, "It's okay. The pain will pass. Don't carry it longer than you need to." The boy sniffled, then smiled weakly, standing up again. The father looked at the young man with surprise, as if those simple words had carried a deeper wisdom. The young man walked away, realizing something powerful. Wisdom spreads not through grand speeches, but through small acts of presence. From that day forward, he began sharing the monk's lesson wherever he went. He told people, "Empty your mind of fears, and you will discover courage. Empty your mind of doubts, and you will uncover confidence. Empty your mind of regrets, and you will finally taste peace." Some listened, some ignored him, but he no longer needed approval, because he wasn't speaking to impress, he was speaking to give. The secret he had once traveled so far to find was now alive within him. The mind, once emptied of clutter, becomes the most powerful tool in life. Years later, whenever life tested him, he would close his eyes and imagine that bag of rocks he once carried. He would remind himself, "I do not need to carry what does not serve me." And just like that, the weight would lift. The monk had been right all along. The world is heavy, yes, but the heaviest part is the baggage we choose to hold onto. When we let go, life becomes lighter. And in that lightness, we find freedom. So if you, listening to this story, ever feel overwhelmed or trapped, remember the lesson of the overflowing cup. Remember the bag of rocks. Remember the stream that never clings.